Chapter 14, Part 2. We live in a system of laws. Look at the center of the circular flow model in Chapter 8. A major part of these laws are the protection of private property rights. People can own the right to control access to certain properties, and they can allow or deny access to people as they see fit. There are restrictions when those properties are deemed public access properties like stores, restaurants, and hotels. In the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about 4 different concepts with very similar names: free goods, economic goods, private property and private goods, and public goods. I'm also going to touch very lightly on merit and demerit goods, but don't worry about those last 2. Free goods. These are goods that are made available to everyone in as much quantity as desired without reducing the availability of the good to others. I walk outside, I can breathe the fresh air, I can drink the clean water. Those are free goods since there is a near zero opportunity cost and there is enough fresh air and clean water to go around. Well, at least until there isn't. Economic goods. Economic goods are useful to society, but somewhat scarce. They have an opportunity cost associated with them. So somebody sitting in a comfy chair, wearing a coat and mittens, all of those are economic goods. Now, this is a way the economists say a tangible, scarce property or resources, stuff and stuff. Private property. These individually owned goods that, when they're being used by someone, cannot be used by another. They are excludable. My house, my car, my possessions, all of those things are private property since they're personally owned, and excludable since I get to choose who uses that resource. Private goods are those things that are commonly owned. When they're being used by one person, they cannot be used by another person. You sitting in that chair at the computer lab at the college prohibits anyone else from using that desk, that computer, that chair, even though they are all paid for by all of us. If you sit on a park bench, if there are enough of you, it'll exclude anyone else from sitting on that bench, unless you get into some lap sitting. Public goods are goods that are made available to everyone because they're technically owned by everyone. The use of a public good by one person does not exclude its use by anyone else. I can drive down the street. It doesn't prohibit anyone else from driving down the street. I can sit in the park. So can others sit in the park. I can be regulated by traffic lights. So can everybody else. Merit and demerit goods. Simply put, merit goods are those things that people underestimate the benefit from: eating right, exercising, early childhood education, and they have positive externalities. Demerit goods are things that people underestimate the costs of: smoking, drinking, caffeine and sugar, and these have negative externalities. So is your college education a private good? Some would say yes, justifying it that no one else will be able to directly benefit from your learning about economics at this particular point in time. My opinion is that your college education is more akin to a public good, since you can use the education you get here and pass it along to others, secondarily non-excludable. It's also going on the multiplier effect that you saw in the last video. Just because I'm lecturing here to you on economics does not mean that others cannot hear the lecture. Give me artificial amplification and I can lecture economics to the masses. Give me a TV camera and a satellite or an internet class and watch out. Free riders. Free riders are people who benefit from goods without having to pay for them. Every weekend I go to Costco and I see cars with little white license plates sitting in the Costco and the Walmart parking lot all over the place. They do not pay license fees. They do not pay roadway taxes unless they fill up their tanks. Yet they enjoy the use of our roads and our highways. If something goes radically wrong, they have our police and fire departments to help them out. So they are enjoying the goods, the roads, the parking, the police and fire protection, and they're not paying for them. Common ownership is property where ownership rights have not been assigned. So technically, these are owned by no one. This is kind of different than public goods. The park is owned by the city of Medford and allowed to be used by everyone. The problem with this is that when property is owned by everyone or owned by no one, there's no personal stake in maintaining the common goods. So the solution is either everybody pitches in and agrees to cooperate, designates a single owner with the rights of an owner, or imposes government regulation.
One of the basic things that I was dealing with, I had some surprises as I wrote the book, and then I had some unsurprises. And one of the unsurprises was that if you try and make people rich by redistributing the wealth, that it tends not to work very well. And one of the reasons for that is that wealth is not, as it initially seems, a zero-sum proposition. If you have too many slices of pizza, I don't have to eat the Domino's box. More pizza can be produced. Wealth is really about increasing productivity. And if you try and redistribute the wealth, right on the face of it, you decrease productivity by taking more away from the more productive parts of society and giving it as a sort of reward for lack of productivity to the less productive. It may be marvelously fair, but it simply doesn't work. So that's what the eat the rich thing comes from. In the back.
Yeah, that's certainly a libertarian perspective, but I mean, you can't produce more fish, and if you don't regulate the fishing industry, which is cleaning out George's Bank now, where fish is going to become extinct if we don't do something.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain limited resources. I mean, not all. It's an economy in general that is not a zero-sum game. It's not any given resource. That's not every given resource is a zero-sum game. Although human beings have a remarkable way of dodging the exhaustion of a resource. For instance, does anybody remember the exact moment we ran out of whale oil? And we did. You know, I mean, there hasn't been any whale oil for a long, long time. Have you noticed around the house that you were short of this? You know, did you try to find any in the supermarket? It's not there. Because as whale oil got more expensive, even before we found out that they were our friends, as whale oil got more expensive, people were looking around for substitutes, and they used petroleum. Now, one of the problems with something like George's Bank, and one of the reasons that it is being depleted, and it is a finite resource, is it isn't anybody's property, and therefore it gets treated like crap. This happens both when something is nobody's property, like a piece of the ocean, and also when it is everybody's property, like a public restroom. The argument that pro-property rights, not just libertarians or conservatives, but people who have a lot of respect for the effect that property rights have on an economy, will make for giving people an investment in, making sure that it matters to somebody individually, whether George's Bank, not just as a moral thing or because you love fish, and not because you belong to the Save the Fish Federation or anything like that, but it's really going to hurt you right in the wallet if those fish leave George's Bank. And so, various people would have different solutions to this. The libertarians would cut it up into, into backyard-size things and auction it, which might not be as silly as it sounds. Then at least somebody would own that thing and could go over and say, your boat, is in my fish yard. Get out of here, or I'll shoot you, I'll call the cops. Of course, there aren't any cops out there, so I don't know how the libertarians will fix that, but never mind. That's